Hi, thank you for coming today. We are going to start right in on a presentation on garbage or recycling decomposition. Technically, I will be referring to it as garbage throughout the presentation, but it was all recyclable material, and I do want to bear that in mind. So I did say recycling as well, garbage slash recycling. So we're just going to jump right in. So the concept was the plan was to place materials out that would traditionally be called garbage or recycling in nature and see how the materials decomposed. So I did use snail mail, as we colloquially call it, to um, act as the material base, also cardboard from food packaging and plastic juice bottle, though unfortunately the juice bottle did actually blow away throughout the experimentation. Sometimes it pops back up, but much of the time it was not documented, and so it will be in some of the photos, but I will not be talking about that as much. Um, it did not appear to have much wear and tear whatsoever in the open air ground recyclable experiment. So that one is on the list, but there's not a lot of data on that one. We I keep saying we, I apologize. I did put these materials under cement bricks to keep them stationary, to keep them in place. And I also had a cup of dirt that I put the recyclables in as well. And so this presentation is actually going to be in different segments. We are going to have the on the ground materials documentation. We are going to have there's a larger snail mail segments as well as small segments. So we are going to have the small segments as a secondary um, subject. And then we are also going to have the third, which is the in the dirt presentation as well. So we are going to start. It took place in suburban central Minnesota, the St. Cloud metro area. It was a backyard patio and then the bordering rocks. It was it was winter, and it was displaced, unfortunately. So that is when it got put into the bordering rocks, and it was placed on top of some fire fuels. There were fire sticks that were piled up, and so they were kind of helter-skelter on top of that. But it was also a snowbank, and then it melted down into the into the sticks. So it was documented, and you'll see them in the photos, of course, if you look close enough. There are a lot of photos because it was a semi-regular occurrence to go out and photograph the pieces of garbage recycling. So it was a fairly longitudinal experiment, depending on uh, how you would how such things, I guess not. I mean, I guess not in the grand scheme of things, but it was from July 2025 through the present, which is late April 2026. So the recyclables garbage endured summer, autumn, winter, and moving into spring. It's long in that it is months, um, almost a year. But I wanted to do the presentation for Earth Month, and so I am doing it now. Um, but it's it is longer than a lot of experimentation might last if that were to be just like a month or some only last a week. So it is not actually longitudinal as in years and years or even a year, but we're pretty close to a year. Um, these are the starting photos. This is how it began. And this is all of the different portions of the experiment. So we do have the larger pieces of snail mail here. Apologies, here and here. These are the cardboard food packaging pieces. And I will apologize again. I do think that um, uh, my results have been skewed. I think that someone maybe got into uh, my files as well, kind of putzing in the photos. And so I will say I cannot 100% um, guarantee the accuracy of the photographic evidence here. Like I said, some of the pieces also have gone missing, and I don't know how much of it was wind or, mischievous neighbors, So just putzing. I can't say for sure. Pieces are missing. The plastic did I, they are pieces, and so they might have blown away too, of course, and that. Um, but I can't guarantee that all of the evidence here is accurate. The bottom line. But this is what I have gathered. So this is the starting point. We've got the snail mail, we've got the cardboard, a little bit of cardboard down here. These are the small segments, and this is the small segments in dirt. And this is the overwinter. They were on the patio, and I decided that I wanted to leave them in the snow. I didn't want to shovel them out or uncover them through the winter to take photos because I wanted it to be more organic and I wanted it to be like an actual winter out. And sometimes you will get plowed out, and so these might become unearthed, uncovered. Um, but they might also not. So it's okay. They ended up actually, they were on the patio and then they were shoveled on accident um, into the snow. And then I recovered them and put them off to the side in the rock border. So this is a reminder, a note to always communicate your intentions with these things and to ensure that everyone's on the same page. So that way the research does not get goofed and it doesn't get thrown out into the snow. But this is just an example of some of the winter photos. They were under a good amount of snow. They got shoveled. I had to pull them out. I kind of unburied them, and then this is kind of an example of how they weathered snowy weather. So you can see that these are the small portions. These are the larger portion of the snail mail. They actually did freeze to the bricks, which is why I was so fortunate to be able to recover them in the first place. Thank goodness. But it was recovered, luckily, and I think these are also the snail mail materials as well. And I don't know if any of these were the cardboard pieces. The cardboard pieces, unfortunately, were the ones that have kind of gone missing. So these are the spring photos, and these were just taken in the last week or so. This is the cup of dirt with the pieces. Unfortunately, I will say I did do some data collection with this garbage, and the photos were inadvertently deleted. And so I went out today to try and get photos again because I was able to replace the pieces, the strips back into the earth because I used this plastic piece as like a sort of spatula and support beam behind the snail mail pieces. So they were relatively intact and how I got them out. But unfortunately, they were no longer in the dirt. I think someone was putzing. Someone wanted to do more research on the little segmented pieces. And so perhaps they took them and got them under a microscope or something. But I could no longer get that data. which was very frustrating for me, the lack of communication there. It was not great, but I do have my knowledge of what I saw, and so I will try to articulate that later. This is just a brief overview. I did go photo by photo for the presentation, but this is some of the garbage. This is some of the snail mails, and I do think that some of it did escape from the envelopes, and so I think that again, this data may be skewed at this point, because I did get my actual results, and then when I did this, and I just kept documenting, thinking it would be all right, but now I am wondering if someone grabbed what they wanted from it, and did not communicate that, of course. So because there are no longer seemingly in the envelopes as much. So that is again unfortunate. This is a cardboard piece. We do have one of the cardboard pieces, um, but it got more messy than I would have liked. I think that unfortunately the lack of communication was off-putting on this, but I still want to share what I do have available. I think that they also were playing with it to see if they could make it decompose faster using various materials, again, without necessarily communicating that with me. And so, um, the joys of shared research materials, alas. Um, but these were on the patio for um, uh, 11-ish months. So, oh, that's not math. Sorry. Um, but less than a year. And so, this is an example of what we've got going now. And this is kind of the direct comparison of what was at the beginning and where it left off here. So you can see the little pieces here, the different pieces of cardboard, um, as well as the, this is, I think, the white cardboard perhaps, and these escaped their envelopes, it looks like. So this is garbage on the ground. This is how it started. And you can kind of see that it was a semi-regular basis. It wasn't a particular date that the photos were taken. It was just every week, every 2 weeks or so. Um, and again, I think someone was in the files and may have putzed a little bit, but I think most of these look to be accurate, and so I do feel comfortable sharing this presentation. Otherwise, I probably would not have. In future, I would probably want to do this experiment a little bit differently, with that communication avenue open. But alas, it wasn't working out, and the communication and just wasn't there. Um, so here it is, how we have it. You can see that there is a gradual wear and tear along the edges. I was actually surprised by how intact the envelopes and the paper products were for much of the experiments. Um, and because you can still, read some of the text, for a lot of it, the most obvious difference was with the black envelope, I think, and that maybe this envelope with the large red ink um, picture, because the black ink of the envelope started to fade at around 7:26. And then it got even more faded here, and then arguably near this, it's pretty much gone. And then, so you still see some of that ink, but everything is still intact. And so it's just unique how that worked out. Just continued photos, continued photos. I do have more photos. I was trying to simplify it for this presentation. I find that having it like um, like this does show you the transitional between, but it can be tough to see from beginning to end, which is why I did do that part first to kind of highlight the differences. But of course, if the envelopes were taken, then this is not necessarily accurate, but the wear and tear is, I believe, to be, semi-comparable. So this is what we've got. The plastic, like I said, kind of came and went. It had a tendency to unstick itself from beneath the brick and blow away and then resurface. So then this is the next few months. This is when it was just completely under the snow, and then um, it was recovered. So you can see elements of it on the close-up of this, but again, I didn't want to go out of my way to uncover it to be able to take good photos. You can kind of see some of the snow particulates and some of the moisture of potential melt on this here. Um, you can see the snail mail there, and you can see snail mail here as well. Um, then it's under snow, under snow, under snow. A little bit of cardboard sticking out there. So we did have the darker brown cardboard at that point. Um, Under snow, under snow, under snow. More of a melt. This is kind of cool to be able to see cycles in the weather also. Um, and of course, the weather is documented online. So if you want to do a study, you might be able to go to the weather website and pick up the records there. But it's pretty cool to see that we had some snow melt, still snow underneath, but that's the cardboard again. You can see that it got to the point at this particular point where it was in the border of the patio where it would not get shoveled and not further, thrown into the snow. But it was also not even. And so you can see that it's a little disheveled. It's no longer stuck to the bricks, but it is held in place still a reasonable amount. So it's still over in the side of the rocks, still over in the side of the rocks, a little helter-skelter. Um, a little helter-skelter here. We got over here. At this point, 3-3, I do think it was this date that I moved it from the border rocks into the grass, and then because I felt like that would be a better place because it was even. But then I realized later that the grass was coming up because it was spring, and I was going to kill off grass if I had it in the grass because it would block the sun. So I did end up taking it out of the grass, but we still have the strips here. You can see where some sand is stuck. We have particulate stuck because of the moisture and the melt. So we do have sand residue, sand residue, sand residue, sand, 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 some discoloration. But everything really, really did hold up. I was, especially last fall, I was kind of watching more closely, and I did note that like ants would kind of crawl across it, but there wasn't any particular incentive to go through it when it was just on the surface of the ground. They didn't need to get food underneath it or food, they didn't have to travel through it. And I do feel like that would have been a different factor for the decomposition process. As it was open to the environment, so it did go through um, varying decomposing variables like the sun, the heat, as well as wind and the rain, and then snow. So it went through a number of environmental factors that contributed, but it was still very much intact. Um, and so I think it would have to be more incorporated into the environment, perhaps having more animals, crawl across it or, like just more. But of course, you don't want animals crawling through garbage. But, just thinking of like landfills or in general, like those are buried after a period of time. Um, and so that's, to help with the decomposition process and to kind of incorporate um, more elements into that decomposition process, I believe. More insects for sure. And we do have the cup of dirt to look at that in a minute here, but this is kind of the how it ended. We had a little more snow. The strips are still here and fine. And then some of it did blow off and end up underneath a bush, and I believe that was this little portion here. And so I did go and collect it and put it back under the brick, but at that point, it was loose leaf and it was free, and I think allowing it to be loose leaf and free, open to the wind, does make a difference. And I actually do have another experiment in the works with a piece of garbage that was just laid out, and I have been observing it. It did get stuck for a number of weeks, and so I unstuck it to see what would happen, where it might blow. It's not in a, it's in a semi, it's in a corner with tall walls. And so it's a relatively controlled environment, but there is still variable and an opportunity for it to blow away. But that is already kind of in the works to see if it is left to its own natural path, versus under these bricks and just stationary, just held where they are. So that is a different factor as well, and that is in the process of being studied. Just one piece though, and so it could be a bigger study too, but it was just something small to contribute to this presentation. Some of the pieces were missing. The communication wasn't there. Um, I did kind of lift up some of these pieces, and they do feel delicate to the touch, like they could rip more easily. Of course, paper in this particular instance, it was easy to rip through in the first place. I did rip the snail mail originally, and so it was organically ripped. So there was one straight edge and then one kind of ripped edge for a lot of the pieces, I believe. And that could have factored in. I did not see any particular noticeable difference. There was still the same, level of wear and tear. I didn't see bugs trying to crawl in. They weren't curious. But of course, they were also on the hot pavement. We might get some ants in that area, and spiders, and maybe an occasional caterpillar or worm. But a lot of that is going to be more in the grass or, in the more woody type landscapes with a little more plant life, I think. So that's another factor to consider. This is the small strips as they progressed through, over time. They were again on the ground, and the same kind of observations as the other ones. I was thinking since they were smaller, they might have less structural integrity, and they might become more easily compromised. And the edges, you can still see, like, this is after months, and the edges are still, you can see a little bit of water damage, a little bit of wavy from the water. This one went through a little bit, and it's a little curved with part of the envelope kind of sticking out on this white one. We had, again, the black ink fade more at 726, and then it was pretty much gone by 817 versus 92 on the small strip. So we lost that ink a little bit sooner there. Still have that plastic piece. Mm, but it's you still have the strong lines, the strong edges on these pieces through 1120 for sure. You can still see that. A little bit of water damage again, some curving in the pieces, but nothing big. They were in the snow for this period of time through 12/9/25, and they were put here, and you can see them sticking out. Thank goodness they did kind of melt stick to the cement, otherwise they would have been lost. Um, we do have those here, and they were under snow, under snow, under snow. There they are after a little bit of a melt. There they are with a little bit of snow still on them. I think they're getting separated at this point, perhaps unstuck from the brick. You can count 1, 2, 3. You got 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 here, 1, 2, 3. And so that's another factor. And this, of course, is when they were on the snow, and then it melted, and then it became just a wood pile. So it was more uneven. And so maybe at this point is when some of them did blow away. We got a couple pieces here. Um, but I do have many more photos, but again, I think someone was working with the files, um, and so I do feel like some of the data was skewed in ways that I was not comfortable sharing on this presentation. So this, I don't like necessarily how this presentation, how the data collection went down, and how the research integrity has been maintained or hasn't been maintained. And for that, I will apologize. Like I said, I do feel like it is fairly representative enough to share in this presentation. And I would want to do it again um, for um, to maintain that experimental integrity. But I do think that it is a relatively low stakes, kind of fun project presentation, kind of low key, hands off experiment. And so I do feel comfortable sharing these results again, like I said, but, but again, I cannot verify that it is 100% accurate. So this is how the cup of dirt started. Um, Almost right away, I actually was mindful, and I saw that it rained, and so I wanted to get a picture immediately because I was like, it rained, let's see what happened. And so that is why I do have the photo from 7/21. You can see that some of the envelope pieces did actually open up with the rain, and you can see some of the damp uh, colors affecting the ink there. And then we have some of the nitrogen phosphorus coming up, and it's turning green with another rain. It did not have drainage in the bottom. And so I think I did end up having to pour out some water upon occasion. You can see some of the phosphorus and nitrogen is kind of um, getting into the paper stuffs. There is some more discoloration in the samples. It has dried out in this one. They are no longer straight up and down. And then more rain and more discoloration, definitely more of the green. And then I did not plant this seed for this weed to grow in this presentation, but it started growing, and I just left it because that would happen in the normal environment also. And so just let the weed grow. It got bigger, it got bigger, bigger, started to die out, started to die out. And you can see there's some discoloration that I don't know if that's a mold there. Um, Everything's kind of getting skewed a little bit. Die off of the weed, and then just let it sit, let it sit, let it sit, let it sit. You still have the black on that particular envelope. So within the first week or so, or the first handful of observations, you know, the ink started to go on the other black envelope pieces, and that's not the case with this one. And so I think that that is unique. It's the black envelope, I believe, is this one right here. If we are looking, yeah, it's this first one because that one correlates with that one. So you see the black, you see the black, black, black. And all the way through, that's still the black envelope, still the black envelope. Whereas the other ones did lose that coloring much faster. And that could have been a mixture of the rain and the sunshine. Um, it could have just, uh, uh, just washed off, washed out, but it didn't for this, maybe because it was straight up and down, but it didn't maintain that straight up and down. So who knows? That is a curious one. It did actually have an interesting like orange, bright orange fungi or bacterium, also alternating with this green phosphorus nitrogen-esque it was potting soil, um, so it was meant to be fertile, and it clearly did have the capacity to spark life. It had that um, orange microbiota in the bottom as well. So I was really thinking that we were going to get a lot of cool action in this one. It was under the snow and then it got shoveled. And that one actually was lost in the snow. I was not able to pull that one into the rocks during the winter. I just had to leave it in the snowbank. Again, it got shoveled. But then I did recover it. The snow that it was in did finally melt, and we have it here. A little less of the black ink. It looks like something happened, and so the integrity of that kind of went, and you can see how it progressed. I think at these ones, the tops, I did look at it roundabouts March, and that is where I had the photos that I no longer have currently. But I was able to use the plastic piece from the planter as the scoop, as the spatula, as the support for each piece of snail mail. And so I was able to pull them up relatively intact. Some of the tops did tear off easily. I found that the tops were dry, whereas the stuffs in the soil maintained more moisture. From what I could see, and it looked like they were actually still very much intact as well. So I think perhaps it just got a little more wear right at that soil line, which is why some of the tops did rip off when I did pull them out to just check them because they may have been subjected to wind or, other factors, but those did rip right along that soil line, a few of them. And the portion under the soil, actually, it was pretty intact, even though I do have photos of the root structures for that weed, and they were intricate. There was a number of roots, but it looked like it had only penetrated through the paper a negligible amount of times. Granted, it was layered paper as well. It was the envelopes or, with more like letters inside of it, unless it was the cardboard pieces. But a lot of it was intact, just a few very small holes um, in actual paper elements. So that made me realize of course, it was much more prone to ripping because of the moisture and the fact that it was a sustained moisture. But there wasn't a lot that was going to move it in the earth. There could have been bugs in the soil in within that little cup, and they could have wanted to crawl through. And it is a small microcosm, and so not having they could have all just as easily not have had that many bugs to crawl through, but there was not a lot of the decomposition there either. So it made me very curious as to what could still be found in like garbage dumps, or because you don't have anything necessarily to disturb those areas. And I actually heard in the olden days, farmers wouldn't bother, like, and even today, rural areas, they might not have garbage collection, or like you do in a suburban area, or like a large dumpster, community dumpster. And so a lot of places they end up just dumping their trash on an obscure corner or in the backyard, or someone said right out the window. Just chuck it out the window. And so I'm just curious what you could find with a little bit of looking, what would actually still be intact if it got buried under the soil. Um, because it's unique. It's a very interesting thing to think if there aren't a lot of plants. And of course, there was only one weed here, and that it had, a decent amount of roots, but they weren't developed roots. They weren't aged roots, and so they weren't big roots. And I think that that would be a force unto itself, having larger root systems that would really branch out. Those root systems can, make concrete uneven, and they can cause upheaval in suburban, infrastructure, urban infrastructure. So root systems themselves can be highly powerful, and in the underground ecosystems. And so we don't want to discredit that. But I am just curious what we could find. And of course, there was only one weed. A lot of natural areas that have become overgrown, you will get a lot more root systems too. So they could definitely cause more damage. That's definitely something that I would be interested in learning more about. It's interesting to me. Of course, these are just pay for stuffs, garbage slash recycling. They could have been recycled. A lot of people throw away things that are not recyclable, that are, different materials than just paper stuffs or basic plastic materials. And, like metals and things that have undergone uh, chemical reactions and have bonded to different elements, or different, different materials have compounded. And so that is definitely more interesting and highly variable as to what would happen to those items. But this was just a very basic starter experiment. And again, it did not necessarily go the greatest. It definitely didn't go as planned. This is a photo of what I was able to recover today. These are just the top pieces of the little tabs that were in the earth. This is the one that we have two pieces. This is the plastic piece. And it looked like there was more moisture on the bottom piece of the plastic, where it looked just like it was when it was buried. Very clean plastic, just a little bit of dirt on it, but nothing like eating away at the plastic. Then we have this shadow on this plastic, which might be due to a chemical reaction. It could have been from the sun, and it kind of goes up into where the plastic was exposed to the sunshine and to the heat for July, August, September, um, of 2025. And so, plastics, I'm wondering, and, if they might actually benefit from different elements for the decomposition process, if they are more prone to decomposition in other environments versus paper stuffs. And that could be common sense to some folks. But this was just an experiment that kind of makes you think about it. This is also an envelope that had a plastic coating, so it would seem, and the plastic remains. The paper element of it is still there, but to less of an extent, and I couldn't say which piece of snail mail that was. So, just kind of something to look at. Were there any questions?